Back in Spiritville, we had a memorable service for Emma. Even though she was very much with us, we had another one for Mimi. Although we had no body, she was presumed to have drowned. Mother took down her sign to announce that she was done contacting spirits. While the ship was sinking, the spirit world overwhelmed me with messages and warnings. At one point, I was frantic and I tried to jump overboard to swim to you. The ship's captain finally had to sedate. I never wanted to go through anything like that again. Instead, she went back to working for Aunt Lily at the hotel, keeping books and managing things. Another sign went up in front of our house, although Amelie changed her name to Amelie M. and became one of the most sought-after psychics in the Western New York. With the force of the combined personalities, Amelie M. was so vibrant, forceful woman, not at all the frail, winsome girl she had once been. In fact, they became the force in Spiritville, much as Mother had been before them. It seems strange to refer to one person as them, but that's how we all came to think of Amelie M. Almost as if they were Siamese twins attached in some psychic intersection of the metaphysical selves. I grieved deeply for Mimi and Thad. Every day I had to remind myself that they were gone, because no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't believe it. I constantly spoke to them in my mind. I even imagined that I heard answers, although I suppose I was only imagining what they might say. If I ever told myself I had to let go of them, the pain would be crippling and I couldn't do it. Mimi had been my dearest friend. Thad was my greatest love. How could they be dead? It was so cruel. I couldn't bear it. Most of the days I spent in my room, crying. My only pleasure was sleeping because I could see them in my dreams so vivid that they were like visits in another time and place. I never stopped feeling their loss. But in May, I got word that my article on Tesla had won me the internship in the Sun. Mother did not immediately agree to let me go, but I desperately needed to get out of Spiritville, where everything reminded me of Mimi. And in the end, my restlessness pleading wore her down, and she conceded. "Take me with you," Blythe pleaded. I couldn't, though I promised she could visit often. Everything about working for the Sun was thrilling. Well, maybe the work was less than stimulating. I read endless realms of copying, checking the telegraphic errors and missing commas, and sometimes aided the department in inserting small types that was missing and first go around. I often returned to my room in townhouse owned by an elderly couple in the West Tweenies, with ink on my hands and face. To get there, I had to pass a building with black gated windows and black worn iron fence that had been the Astor counting house. Every time I went by, the pain of the previous April came back to me anew, and I soon found a new way to go. One evening, I went down to Chinatown to see Lee in her father's restaurant. I got to the front door, but stopped before going in. I hadn't realized this was the same place I'd eaten with Thad. I clamped the handkerchief to my face to soak up the rush of tears that had hurled away. That night, I cried myself to sleep, crawled into a ball in my small room. Those 6 months were a time of bitter loneliness. For me, I spent my day alone in the museums and reading. I had finished every Sherlock Holmes adventure and so began reading them over again, beginning with the Scandal in Bermuda, first written in 1891. It surprised me how my perception of Holmes had changed since the first encounter with him. When I once thought of him to be a good and a dispassionate reason, someone I should emulate, I now saw him as a human with flaws. He was moody and irritable. He had no friends other than the understanding Dr. Watson. Even his fervid attention to detail began to strike me as abnormal. I kept reading the newspapers, too. There were hearings held on the Waldorf Astoria to determine what had gone wrong on the Titanic. A panel declared that it had been too large a ship with too small a rudder, and no mention of the crack in the rudder. I wonder if they ever even knew about it. One day I came upon an article written by George Bernard Shaw, and the paper called the Daily News, and the leader claiming that the heroism of the people on the Titanic had been exaggerated and romanticized. I was outraged. I remember seeing the playwright outside Stead's rented townhouse and recalled he was supposed to have been a good friend of his. A day or two later, I came upon a rebuttal written by none other than Dr. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. He said, "It's a painful sight to see a man so undoubted genius using his gifts in order to misrepresent and decry his own people. He was Dad's real friend, and I thought more highly of him than I ever had before." I also kept clippings, accounts of Tesla and his ramblings about the war in Europe. That year, Tesla had more money worries. His creditors at the Windercraft Tower were demanding their money back, and Colonel Astor gone, Mr. Bolt demanded $20,000 in back rent. Tesla sold the scrap metals from the tower to pay for the debt. Eventually, Tesla was forced to move out of his beloved Waldorf Astoria and had no idea where he was living. Tesla was nominated for a Nobel Prize in Science that year, and for his work in high-frequency resonated transformers. But when he heard he would have to share the award with Edison, he said he wouldn't accept the nomination. He could have certainly used the money from the award, but once again he was too principled to compromise. When time had come for my internship to end, my editor asked if I'd like to stay as a paid assistant. I jumped at the chance. The couple I was staying with said I could stay on if I started paying rent, and I had agreed. That would be the rest of my life, but then something remarkable happened.